So up next, we have John McElligott and John Lloyd. John McElligott, CEO of York Exponential, as you all are probably aware by now, and John Lloyd, the CEO of MANTEC, which is the South Central Pennsylvania MEP. So please, if you'd like to take the couch. All right, so thank you for joining us. This is all about emerging collaborations to build our workforce for the future. So one of the things that we're very interested in exploring here is MEPs are the conduit through which manufacturers upskill and become even more advanced. So with the focus on how much of York's local workforce is highly advanced manufacturing, we have to give some of the credit to that, for that to MANTEC. So I'd love to hear a little bit about what MANTEC's programs are that have really helped advance manufacturing locally, and an idea for the future, what you see that turning into.
Well, thanks. Yeah, number one, MANTEC is, as you noted, one of the manufacturing extension partnership centers that are prevalent throughout the United States, helping existing manufacturers innovate, grow, and be profitable. In the process of that, they add jobs, create wealth to the economy, and so we believe we have a very important mission. We've been at it since 1988, but we're seeing now changes at an accelerating pace, and much of those changes is around technology. We've identified 9 technology areas that we're promoting to our clientele, which is primarily the small and medium-sized manufacturers that are challenged to keep up with the speed and pace of technology. And so we, number one, have to create an awareness of those technologies that are changing and help them innovate, adopt those technologies, and of course, as you mentioned, the workforce is a critical component of that. They've got to find people that are comfortable with those technologies and can implement those technologies into their workplace.
Fantastic. And where do you see MANTEC's biggest growth market in helping local companies advance in the future now?
We serve 9 counties of South Central Pennsylvania, and the great thing about this area, number one, is there's 2,400 manufacturers in our service area here in South Central Pennsylvania, and we make everything here. We make products for Homeland Security and National Defense. We are the snack food capital of the world. We make chocolate with Hershey Chocolate and many other candy companies, motorcycles. Harley-Davidson is right up the road here. Metalworking, plastics, pharmaceuticals, you name it, we make it here. And that gives us vibrance in this area. As products are manufactured, shipped, invoices are created that bring dollars into our local economy, and that's been the backbone of the economy of this region for a long time. As far as the workforce goes, nationally there's somewhere around 9.5% of the population in manufacturing. In this region it's double that. So we've got a strong manufacturing heritage that continues to this day.
Great. Now, John, I know a lot of the work you're doing is all focused on working with local manufacturers as well, whether that's servicing them or having them be a supplier to you. Could you tell me a little bit about your experience working in the local market? And yeah, we'll start with that.
Yeah, so it's been interesting. So I don't come from a manufacturing background. I come from more of a software technology kind of background. And so there is definitely a very specific culture that comes with manufacturing. Many of the companies that we've had here are multi-generational. So they've been within that same family for a very, very long time. And so figuring out, and you might be able to talk to this a little bit as well, Joan, how to bring some of these folks into the 4th Industrial Revolution has not been the easiest of tasks. But as it begins to transition, one of the interesting things about York and Central PA in general is once we're in, we're all in. So there is definitely a tipping point starting to happen. There were some technologies that passed us by, and I think part of this comes with manufacturing just in nature. It's very focused on what's happening right now. Like you've just got to build it and get it out the door, build it and get it out the door. So sometimes it's very hard to look up and see what's coming. I think what's happening right now, though, is there's definitely a tipping point Things are starting to accelerate. A lot of millennials are taking over companies. So, the kids are becoming now the leaders at these companies. So they're starting to embrace technology at a much more rapid rate. So I think that comes with manufacturing in general. Like once the manufacturers get it and they understand the piece they're supposed to play and what they actually are supposed to do, it's like a switch clicks. And I think maybe it's the timing. Manufacturing is coming back. There is a growing threat from China. Like I think we're realizing that outsourcing all of that and having things built overseas has compromised us. Manufacturers by nature are patriotic and they care about this country deeply. So I think part of this is a little bit of a moral reframing. So like the idea of putting it in a context that makes sense, I think, to the manufacturers here. Once they understand how important it is and the part they need to play, they do tend to go all in. So I think that's starting to shift. Technology is starting to be seen, I think, as a necessity. Before it was like a nice to have. Now I think they're understanding that it is a need to have. Hasn't been the easiest of transitions, but I can definitely see that it's starting to happen on a much broader scale. Before it was a very small group of manufacturers that I think really understood it. But now I think that conversation is starting to be had, I would say, across not just this county, but across Pennsylvania in general. I mean, would you agree with that, John?
Yeah, we see one of our roles is creating that awareness that how rapidly the world is changing, and too many manufacturers are stuck in the old way of working better, faster, cheaper, working longer hours to get the job done. And there truly is a need to innovate in products and processes on how product gets out the door. Our approach when we work with manufacturers is, number one, build a relationship and establish trust. That's the foundation, but then assess where they are from a technology standpoint. Some of our companies that we work with are very primitive, others are much more advanced. We assess where they are, their current state, and we try to take them to the next level of technology. You aren't going to take a company that's primitive and convert them to lights out manufacturing. That's just not a realistic goal, so we're trying to just take them from the current state to the next level. Once they get to that next level and they grow comfortable there, we'll take them to the next level. But these small and medium-sized manufacturers are the backbone of our supply chains. Small and medium companies represent 95% of the companies in the country. And these companies really need help in getting to the next level of technology. And if they don't do it, there's really an imperative that they'll become non-competitive. And to keep manufacturing strong in this region, in this state, and this country, we really need to help foster technology in the workplace.
Yeah. Interestingly, so just to kind of, I guess, now John's got me thinking about some other experiences we had. One of the reasons we focused on collaborative robots is because these are smaller robots that are machines that can operate other machines. So it is that kind of that first step, and it's solving a very immediate problem. I remember when we first were talking about this, and John and I have known each other for a while. Actually, was the main keynote for the MEP National Conference in Detroit, which was awesome, and I've spoken at maybe, 12 different MEPs across the United States. One of the things I was hearing at the very beginning from a lot of manufacturers was how lazy millennials were and how lazy kids are. And so it was a lot of being just mad that kids are different. And I think now many have come to the conclusion that it's not necessarily that they're lazy, they just don't want to do those same jobs. And so part of this adoption of technology, honestly, I think is they're being forced to adopt it. It's not necessarily they're happy about it. But I've seen a lot of manufacturers become motivated by it being practical. Like trying to sell them on a lot of the benefits and all the optimism and things. Sometimes, I used to get this when I first started presenting to manufacturers. People would go, wow, that's really cool. You'll learn when you grow up. Like they just thought I was naive. And but once I started to talk more about the fear and some of the actual problems we were going to be facing, I found that manufacturers are actually very practical. Like, I think when they understand that, okay, I got to get this done. I may not like it, but I'm going to do it because I have to. Like, that is actually one of the greatest benefits, I think, of our manufacturing community, is that they are very practical. And now it hasn't become an esoteric problem where it's robots are far away, AI is very far away, we'll just get kids, it'll be fine. I think now they're starting to realize, like, okay, we have to change. And manufacturers in general, I mean, during world wars, they tend to step up when something big like that happens. So maybe we're kind of at that tipping point now.
Well, the other thing that needs to change is the perception of manufacturing, and it's particularly important with the workforce problem. the perception that manufacturing is dirty, dark, dingy, and dangerous still persists to this day. And as we infuse technology into the manufacturing workplace, it really has transformed the nature of jobs in companies, and they are sophisticated, they're challenging, they're computer-based positions, and those old technologies are outdated, and that's what we need to continue to work to change.
I think there's an interesting point here that a lot of the small and medium manufacturers are using equipment that tends to be rather older, quite a bit older, and the technology of different robotic systems, especially cobots in this case, has advanced enough that they're able to operate those machines, and then someone is able to operate the cobots, just supervise, reprogram when necessary, which leverages the fact that there aren't people coming into the workforce in large enough numbers to fill all the jobs that are being lost to the silver tsunami. The average age of the manufacturing workforce is very close to the retirement age at this point, and there's a huge body of employees that are going to retire in the next 5 to 10 years, and there's not enough young employees coming in to have it be a plug-and-play exchange. So there's a really interesting opportunity here in the market to help manufacturers continue the output that they need to continue and increase their output with a different skill set coming into the workplace.
And just to touch on that, that's one of the reasons we focused on collaborative robots. For those of you that don't know what a collaborative robot is, they're human size or smaller, designed to work next to people, safe so they don't have to be caged off, they're easy to program. One of the things that we found, and even if you talk about upskilling, so you talk about computer programming, people learning new skills, one of the things that we've seen in manufacturing, a lot of the folks that work on the floor, the idea of them going back to school is not a very appealing idea. I mean, a lot of them graduated high school, they've been in that job for a while, so the idea of them becoming a computer programmer is just, they're not interested in earning more, they want to keep what they have, which is very understandable. So these kinds of technologies like collaborative robots, while maybe the kids don't want to do that job, the collaborative robots can actually help save jobs. I mean, you might have, if you have one person and you need 5, that company can't get contracts. But if you have the one with 4 robots, that company can grow, which means now there's stability for that older worker, so they can reach retirement. I mean, that for me would be devastating if there are people that are coming up to retirement age, but companies close down and they can't make it to retirement. So if we can use the robots right now as a way to augment, so that's one big thing we say is we don't say automation, we say augmentation. We want to use collaborative robots to augment the existing workforce so they can keep what they have while we train the next generation to work alongside and maintain the robots. So I don't think this is we can flip a switch and solve all the problems, but I definitely think we can help transition into the future of work. I mean, there is a lot of talk of, training coal miners to be coders and all this. Maybe you'll get an anomaly where that'll work once in a while, but that is not a one-to-one comparison. So if we can use the technology to allow manufacturers to grow their businesses, stabilize, keep people employed while we transition into the next generation, I think that's a win-win for everybody.
And what we need to convince manufacturers of is that a large part of the solution to the current workforce shortage is by getting more work done with the existing workforce.
Right.
It's not necessarily just throwing more people at the problem. Collaborative robots, automation, other aspects of technology are allowing us to do much more work with the existing workforce.
Right.
Part of our strength in this country is that we lead the world in productivity. And we need to continue to find advances in productivity, and automation is a large key to that. We can get more work done simply by infusing automation, by using continuous improvement techniques to leverage the degree of work we get from the current workforce.
Yeah, definitely, and I think that brings another interesting thing, the continuous improvement aspect. A lot, as many in the crowd know, a lot of people here, or a lot of the concepts that have come out of Silicon Valley on how best to scale businesses, start businesses and scale them, are taken from manufacturing improvements that especially that came out of Toyota. So we're talking specifically about the Toyota way and the startup way and lean manufacturing, lean startup. There's an opportunity here, since we have such a strong network of small and medium enterprise manufacturers. There's also an opportunity to help create a lower cost of entry for new businesses in the same mold. So I think that's one of the ways in which I know you've structured your company a bit to be able to do robots as a service and dramatically reduce the cost of getting equipment and being able to adjust rapidly to demand. Where do you, well, one, I'd love to hear a little bit about that from you. And then to follow up, where do you see that playing into the wider process of helping companies become more advanced?
Yeah, so for those of you that don't know, so Robot as a Service, we're one of 3 companies doing this. So we realized that while some of the larger companies can afford to own the technology, some of the smaller mom and pops that are a part of the supply chains here that are national defense, I mean, that we rely on as a nation, they're contract based. So they might only have a 6-month contract. And they honestly just want the technology to work. They don't want to own it. They don't necessarily want to learn it. And so you can essentially hire our robots by the hour. So the same way you would hire a temporary worker, you would hire one of our cobots to be a temporary worker. The way we've managed to do that is we've gotten very good at getting very fast. Traditional engineering firms make money on hours, so they would bid out a job and it would be long and extended. Our goal has been to shorten it and lower the price. The ways we've done that is, at the beginning we took on every job that there was that was difficult so that we could basically learn how to productize a lot of things. So now we have a welding robot, we have a grinding, so we've standardized a lot of these things. And the other way we've done it is by training our own robot techs from the ground up. So most of the folks that work for me are master's degrees or PhDs, but mainly they've spent all of their time figuring out how we can train regular people in 15 weeks to work for us to do this. So I'm able to have right now folks that I'm training up that are basically citizen engineers, I mean the robot mechanics, that were doing the work of before people with bachelor's degrees and master's degrees. So I can, they're good, solid middle class jobs, but I can afford to pay them less, which means I can pass on those savings to the customer, which means I can lower the barrier to entry. By doing the robot as a service, I can lower it even more. And so, so we see ourselves, while we're like a 5 to 1, 10 to 1 ratio now of robot mechanics versus master's degrees and PhDs, within the next 3 to 4 years, we want to flip that to where it's a 1 to 10. So for every 1 degree, we have 10 people that we've trained from the ground up. I think the robots will not go viral the same way that software does, right? Yeah. Robots need people. It's going to be how fast can you build, install, and maintain. Those are manufacturing and people problems. York and Central Pennsylvania and places like us are very good at making things, and we have the genetics to, like the mechanically minded genetics of building things, fixing things, putting things together. It's in our DNA. So we are poised to be the epicenter of where robots will go viral from. The question is, how fast can we mobilize around this?
And manufacturers by nature are risk adverse. And what I like about your program at York Exponential is that you've lowered the barrier to taking that step into automation. By leasing by the hour, day, week, whatever a manufacturer needs, by lowering that barrier, by reducing the intimidation factor, by servicing the robots, programming the robots for what a manufacturer needs, to be able to start with simple pick and place applications before they get to more sophisticated roles for robots. All of those things make it easier for a manufacturer to take that step into automation. And again, as I said earlier, we're simply looking at assessing where manufacturers are and taking them to the next level. When they get to that level, then we can take them beyond that. But I think your program is a very important step in being able to achieve that.
Yeah, a good example of this and working with the manufacturers and figuring this out, one of the new products we've launched is our welding robot. And it's interesting because the way you program it is, if you're a welder, you weld with the robot, and that's how the robot learns. So you don't actually have to know any computer programming. So that's what we've tried to do, is develop products internally that can bridge that gap to make that ease of use, to lower the intimidation factor. When a welder can do it and move it, and then the robot does what they tell it to do, there is a certain power that comes with that, because not only are manufacturers risk adverse, they're very often technology adverse. Like they think, oh, I'm not tech savvy, I'm never going to get this because it was an invisible world. By allowing the human to train the robot instead of program it, we've lowered that intimidation factor. It's actually one of the unique things about York Exponential. So there's about 30 engineers that work for me now, but there's 8 that are just research and development and product development. So they're led by Dr. Kyung Kim. He's a PhD in robotics, holds 3 patents in human-robot interaction. Their job all day is to develop these kinds of technologies that lower the risk and intimidation for not only our customers, but they make it easier for our robot technicians and robot mechanics to use. But I think you're right that if you can lower the intimidation, lower the risk, also manufacturers are very proud, so they don't necessarily want to boast that they're scared of the technology. So if you can find a way to make it empowering for them, they tend to embrace it a lot faster.
And local manufacturers, I've had conversations with a number of times where they think that when you talk about robots, that it involves replacing jobs.
Right.
And it's important that we have things that are flexible, like robots as a service, to be able to make it possible for them to take on more contracts than what they think they can handle with the number of employees they have.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's an extreme lack of welders in the country right now. So, you know, being able to have your existing welders increase the amount of welding that can be done is dramatically powerful.
Yeah, we very often say we don't believe robots are going to take people's jobs. Many people have been doing robots' jobs.
Yeah.
And so we're at, I mean, the truth is we're at this point now where if we can use the technology to empower and not replace, I think that's going to be the key.
Great. All right. And with that, I would love to get a warm round of applause for these two.